...2004 year, 1st of May, in Lithuanian history one of the most important dates. Country becomes a member of the European Union and a bit earlier became a full member of NATO. Nowadays, Lithuania is on the way of its development as one of the European countries. Why did Lithuanian people want to become a part of the European Union? What would be the benefits from each side? What happens in the countries where people desire to be a member of European Union? About these topics we talked to a member of Parliament of Lithuania, Liberal Petras Auštrevičius.
First of all, Europe has to be free and a whole, meaning united. And it means that Europe has to be open to all countries which are performing accordingly and recognize European and universal democratic values and implement them. So that's why Lithuania was very part of this enlargement process. From the Lithuanian point of view, for us it's a benefit to be among those same-minded countries and to have equally based principle for cooperation, political, economical cooperation. And that's why we saw it so important to be among the countries which really share values and have the same understanding about economic development. We have to agree that probably the biggest benefits will be taken by younger population who are more dynamic, willing, still in the stage of studying, and it increases absolutely effectively opportunities of those people. I mean, to share experiences, to see different countries.
It is interesting what young people think about membership of European Union. We talked with students of the various gymnasium. According to them, European Union has advantages in several terms for youth.
Martynas Jaugelavičius. I believe the EU and NATO is extremely important to both our well-being and the economy. For example, our school is renovated on behalf of the funds of the European Union. So I believe all of these students here in Didžvadas can feel that impact of the European Union. Speaking about NATO, we have to mention that the NATO Baltic Air Pulsing Mission's base is here in Šiauliai. So, and if you have in mind the current situation in Crimea, in Ukraine, and also remembering the events in Georgia in 2008, although about 70 years have passed after the Second World War and, of course, the Cold War, there's some political tension that is still visible in this Eastern European region. So I believe NATO is extremely important for our well-being and our safety.
Geiste Savickaitė. Well, the first thing that comes into my head about European Union is that we have some rights and we have ability to travel. And I believe that this one is a really big advantage for everyone, because we don't need to make visas or, I believe that this European Union is wonderful because of the education. We have a possibility to learn in any European country, and this is a big advantage for every student, every teacher probably, that they can travel, go to foreign countries, to foreign universities, and it's very advantageable.
Kipras Talat Kelpša. For the youth, it's great because you have huge possibilities to study in UK, in France, in Germany, in Scotland. You have free access to every single European Union country. It's very comfortable when you do not need to stop in the customs office and give your passport. You just drive through. NATO air policy for the Baltic states, it's guaranteeing that you are safe, you can live normally, and you will be defended.
As with any organization, there are certain requirements that European member states are required to respect. But it is said that in general, the advantages of European Union membership substantially outweigh any costs. Let's listen to Liberal Petros Auštrevičius' opinion about security. Do you nowadays feel safer than until 2004? I mean, until you become a member of NATO? If yes, from what? I mean that in security, NATO is one of the most important players.
Right. Indeed, we didn't disconnect those two integrational processes, EU and NATO. I mean, NATO for us was a basic stone, a basic kind of fundamental integrational issue because of the security, and nobody can replace NATO up to now. And EU is not in competition with NATO to provide security and stability. I mean, these organizations are two different ones, so that's why this transatlantic security organization, as NATO stands for, still a remaining important institution, and present days is just one example which proves the right consideration of this issue.
Last several months in Ukraine, there were meetings for supporting European integration, unlike the ex-president Viktor Yanukovych. After revolution, President of Ukraine resigned, but new government has to fight for Ukraine's territorial integrity. They have to defend their country from Russian occupation. Nowadays, Ukraine is in a crisis to get over its difficulties from Russian Federation. Ukraine is on the border of war against Russia. The Lithuanian Foreign Minister Linas Linkevičius said on 3rd March in Brussels at an extraordinary meeting of the European Union Foreign Affairs Council on the situation in Ukraine.
We are exposed to a situation reminiscent of the events of 2008 in Georgia. Have we learned the lessons of that period? I'm afraid that we have not. A threat of yet another frozen conflict has emerged in Europe. The international community must not allow such actions. A clear breach of international law and infringement of inviolability of the state border. These events should not derail European aspirations of the European neighbors.
The Member of Parliament Petros Auštrevičius thinks that each country has its free will to choose their country's path in spite of Russian factor.
Unfortunately, we have to recognize clearly that Russia presented itself as very unstable country which you can't rely on. The country which does not respect bilateral and multilateral agreements, no rule of law, finally. So it's a challenge because Russia presents a big economic market, which is an interesting one for many business units and countries in general. But on the other hand, this instability, kind of the confidence-based cooperation aspect brings a lot of issues for reconsidering Russia as a stable partner.
What do you think about Ukrainian and Georgian people's wish to join European Union? The situation with Georgia is rather different and difficult than it was in Lithuania. I mean, today Georgia's nearly 25% of territory is occupied by Russia. How long time is it necessary to pass to integrate these countries into European Union structures? Or is it dependent on Russian government's international policy only?
I don't believe that any third country might predecide any country's will and possibilities to join the European Union once that country qualifies accordingly to all criteria of the membership. It concerns Georgia as well as Ukraine. Both those countries are European ones. They lie on the European continent part, and as long as those countries will go through deep political, social, economic, and legal reforms, and I truly believe in this process because there is no any real alternative for those countries. I believe European Union will have to make decisions about receiving those countries as full-fledged members. I don't think the present situation has to be taken as kind of the limiting those countries' accession to the European Union. Not at all. I mean, it's a difficult time, but let's be politically and mentally ready for challenging the situation, because European Union stability depends on neighbors' stability, and this is a very important factor to be taken into consideration. It's a very sad part of 21st century history that we saw countries bordering European continent and not respecting European values. And those values about respect of human rights, about the territorial sovereignty and integrity. Looks like Russia forgot those things once it signed agreements. And present Russian leadership is not a democratic one.
In the 20th century, Great Britain's Prime Minister Winston Churchill said nearly the same about Russia.
The value of the agreement with Russia has the cost of the paper on which the agreement is signed.
The president of Lithuania, Dalia Grybauskaitė, said in an interview on LRT's television broadcast TC Žinoti. Europe needs to save face, not Russia. It no longer has one. It has only the face of Putin. Europe is still not fully aware of what is happening and still does not understand that it is time to Europe to decide and save face. Nowadays, Lithuania is one of the European Union countries which strongly criticizes Russian officials' political steps and is supporting Ukrainian people's independent wish to be a member of Europe.
I think this is one of the biggest challenges the European Union faces in its existence. I mean, Russian behavior towards its neighbors with which the European Union has extensive political and economic relationship. But I'm more optimistic now seeing those developments on the EU side. Never before the European Union had to take those decisions as it already did. It has an agreement, a plan how to impose stricter and stricter sanctions on Russia, and I believe even today the Council of the Foreign Ministers of the European Union will come up with further decisions concerning those measures. And principally speaking, we have to be ready for those unfavorable developments in future. So that's why European Union has to show its will, strength, and readiness for implementation as soon as possible.
Lithuania has already achieved its European choice not so long time ago. There are also countries like Georgia and Ukraine waiting for their time to achieve membership of European Union and Northern Atlantic Treaty Organization. But they have to pay for it very expensive because of Russia. They have to pay for it by their lives. Nowadays, Ukraine is in its war to cross the Rubicon finally. After Soviet Union, Georgia also is always under Russian pressures. Well, Georgia is a neighbor of Russia, and though it was inevitable moment. As one of Georgian public figure Niko Nikoladze said,
the policy of a country is not determined by the people's wish, but mostly by a geographical location. Policy is not a new modern hat, like we can change it according to our taste, but it is ancestors, such a traditional and variable treasure like nationality or faith.
Every successful person has a painful story, and every painful story has a successful ending. It may be said about the countries also. Time will show us what will happen in the end of the stories of Ukrainian and Georgian European future.